Konnichiwa, and welcome to this episode of the National Railway Museum podcast, where, as you might have guessed, we're talking about all things Japanese. The Railway Museum podcast is our attempt to sort of tell deeper, more exciting stories that really need the time to be unpacked, and we're doing it with an expert. And my expert guest today is my lovely colleague Rob.
Hey.
Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Ollie. So I'm Rob. I'm the lead curator of the Railway Futures Gallery here at the National Railway Museum. It's currently under construction.
Excellent.
And I can't wait for it to open. Yeah.
We're really excited about the gallery coming. I keep seeing really exciting presentations, so that'll be a thing to put in people's diaries to come back and see.
Absolutely.
But let's go. There's an obvious starting point with today's podcast, I think, isn't it? Because apart from, I think, like, visitors who are steam enthusiasts come for Mallard, particularly, and for others. But I think if you ask visitors who aren't rail enthusiasts, there's one vehicle that they're maybe more drawn to than anything else in our collection, and it's our bullet train.
Yep.
So do you want to start with the bullet train?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, with our Zero series. So, in fact, when we did a lot of research at the very start of the Futures Gallery project, we asked people what they thought of the future of the railways. We asked them what they wanted. We asked them what they thought of when they heard that kind of word "future" and railways together. And the word that came up most was Japan. So I think that's kind of like a good symbol, right?
Yeah.
That vehicle in our collection is probably the reason why they think that, I would say. So it's the only preserved bullet train outside of Japan, and it is also the only vehicle in our collection that wasn't built or operated in Britain. And that kind of gives a good indication, I suppose, as to why it's so important. You know, why it is that we would want this, because, you know, why else would we, go to all the trouble of getting that thing over here if it didn't operate in Britain? That is kind of the reason why it's the symbol that the passenger railway had a future in the post-war period, really. And there's so much that we can go into with the history of it. We can talk about the technology. So yeah, where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, it's just an amazing vehicle before we get into the sort of background of it. And it still does, I think, for something from the 60s, it still looks remarkably futuristic, particularly obviously like surrounded by steam engines in our Great Hall. I think as well, like for the public, a lot of it's that people can get inside it, right?
Yeah.
And it feels
absolutely
more familiar, in comparison to heritage carriages. It's got that long central aisle, seats on either side, almost like aeroplane seating that people are much more used to, I think, now, aren't they?
Definitely. I mean, from the outside, it looks like a plane, doesn't it, straight away? And that's intentional as well. The Japanese at the time were trying to prevent domestic flights, and then this is kind of your answer to that. But yeah, on the inside, I mean, it looks maybe a little dated, but it looks like a conventional train that you get on now. And, if you're on the East Coast Main Line, maybe not how wide it is, because it's a lot wider than ours, but if you're on the East Coast Main Line, you got on that, you kind of wouldn't, I don't know, you wouldn't be looking up and down going, where am I?
No, which is like a big contrast for people compared to some of our older vehicles.
Absolutely.
Or other vehicles, yeah. Should we stay with that then? Should we stay with the project and the train? So this is a project that has its origins in the middle of the 20th century? Like, how far back do we need to go to understand Shinkansen?
For the Shinkansen, you would go back as far back as 1939. Okay. So a lot of people think, obviously, it opens in 64 and it's a mid-50s project. But there was actually the idea of having bullet trains in 1939. The idea was what the Japanese government wanted to do is change or reduce the time from Tokyo to Osaka from 8 hours to 4.5 hours. And the plan back then was a mix of steam locomotives and electric locomotives. And something got in the way of that plan, a little thing known as the Second World War.
Yeah.
And then things kind of went awry then. But then we've got the economic miracle that happened in Japan from 1955 to the early 70s. And it's called a miracle, but there were obvious reasons for that. There was technological advances, there was increased foreign trade as well. Japanese people would save a lot of their money, which would be invested in different things as well that would boost the economy. And that gave the opportunity to kind of revive this idea of a high-speed network. And we end up having the first high-speed rail line with the Shinkansen. So you've got kind of two people at the centre of this. Yeah, you've got Shinji Sogo, who is the president of Japanese National Railways of JNR, And then you've got Hideo Shima as well, who's appointed as the chief engineer of the Shinkansen project. And there's 4 kind of key principles to the Shinkansen.
Okay.
Those are, we want to go 210 kilometers an hour, so 130 miles an hour.
Which is really, really like a huge step up from in terms of speed, just to sort of gloss for people. Like,
yeah, massively.
Like a big leap forward, not just like a sort of percentage increase.
No, it's massive. It's the first high-speed rail line anywhere in the world. Yeah. And, we go up and down the East Coast main line at 125 miles an hour, and that was still beaten back then, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Yeah. Then it needs to be separate infrastructure. They need a separate line. If you were to go from Tokyo to Osaka in 1963, you would go past 1,000 or thousands of level crossings, over 1,000 level crossings even, and that isn't any good for safety. It's not any good for speed. It's not any good for capacity. So to have new infrastructure is great, and that infrastructure is going to be 4 foot 8.5 inch gauge. And obviously, for people listening to the podcast who don't know what gauge is, because we might as well start from the start.
Yeah.
That's just the width of the track, so from one rail to the other.
And this is standard gauge.
This is standard
that people
gauge,
might be know from a British context, but Japan doesn't. This is a different gauge for Japan, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm sure we'll talk about this later on when we go even further back. But Japan uses 3 foot 6 inch gauge, so 1,067 mil. And that's really narrow, and that limits a lot of things. It's got its positives as well, but it's really limiting in a lot of factors as well. So they decide on standard gauge, which is Stevenson, and I know you've spoken with Anthony about 1825. And
we're all the way back to like Railway 200 territory. So we'll stick on Japan and not veer back into Railway 200. But that was point 3, and there was a point 4.
Sorry, no. Point 3 actually is that they would take the signals off of the line side and have them in cab. So you've got automatic train control, ATC, and that again totally transforms things. And then the final is that these are EMUs. These are electric multiple units, and before that, as I say, they were thinking about steam and electric locomotives, but these are different. Each wheel is powered as well. So those are kind of your 4 ingredients for what is deemed to be the world's most kind of successful railway project, I would say,
Yeah, and this is building on, as you say, this economic miracle, but also the other side of that, which is like this enormous period of urban growth in post-war Japan, where Tokyo is increasing by millions of people, so is Osaka. And there's a quote, I think, that we had, the Tokaido main line, which is the one that it's going to take this capacity off, is only about 3% of Japan's rail network, but it carries 25% of its traffic. Most trains run at an occupancy level of 300 to 400% capacity. My Japanese pronunciation could be terrible, but Kotsujigoku, which is apparently just traffic hell, which is a wonderful understatement. But
I mean, the comparisons are obvious, aren't they, between there in the UK and
I'm just thinking people watching are going to be like, I know what 300% capacity
feels
like.
Exactly. I've been trapped like a sardine,
and that's not true. And we can come back to that like UK comparison later, I think. But let's try and stick with like Shinkansen now and the project. So they've got these 4 principles. And construction begins
in 1959.
1959.
Yeah, right. 1959. I think it's April 59 because the month after it gets announced that Tokyo has won its bid to host the Olympic Games in 1964. And that gives you a big fat deadline.
and just what engineers love.
Yeah, exactly. just what they want.
Yeah, perfect.
And Mr. Sogo, the president of JNR, he really undersells how much this will cost.
Yeah, this is the sort of infamous side of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But sorry, so he undersells how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, this isn't very. You don't think of when you think of Japanese culture, you don't think of dishonesty, and this absolutely was dishonest with the idea that we need to get it built, and it won't get financed if we make out it costs
the true costs of
yeah, absolutely. So he skipping on a bit, he ends up falling on his sword in 1963.
No, not literally. We have
no.
Just to be very clear about this. With
yes, no. So he resigns because of the economic misforgivings that have happened there. But the thing is Japan's government is so invested in this now; they have to see it through, right?
Yeah, he sort of painted them into a cut because he takes out an international loan, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
yeah,
Which they have to underwrite.
Yeah, and as president of JNR as well, he takes from different railway project pots and he shoves them all into the Shinkansen. And so we'll talk about the opening, but in 1965, the year after the opening, he is decorated by the emperor. And doesn't that just say it all, right? That the Shinkansen was a huge success and that it was well worth it. But it was probably right, he might not have got it over the line, and we know again about railway projects that just eat money and eat time. But yeah, so going back then to the 1960s, they were really worried that they wouldn't be able to connect Tokyo and Osaka, which is 320 miles, in time for the Olympic Games. That's it's kind of the distance London to Edinburgh. And they had this mantra, the workers, so they were really worried about it. And we've seen there's kind of written notes. I think it's from Hideo Shima's diary. It's some sort of written document anyway that says that there were these big anxieties. But this mantra was, must be in time for the Olympics. It must be in time for the Olympics. Now, it opens on the 1st of October 1964. The Olympic Games is the 10th of October 1964. It's not bad, is it?
No, it's not. It's just squeaking in there.
Very much so.
There's clearly a lot of anxiety in that production team right at the end.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, like, we've talked about the principles, but, like, the cost of this is, like, because everything is new here, isn't it? Like, it's a whole, we're not using pre-existing tracks or anything, like a whole new track bed, new track, and like this vehicle's like really intense on the track. I seem to recall as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I think I think basically they were trying to do it right. They were like, let's not because actually, if we were to talk about Britain in that period, and you've got this is the time of the beaching cuts. You've got sort of a railway that isn't making a lot of money. We were thinking, how do we get even more trains onto the track? And the way to do that would be to increase capacity and to try and get those distances between trains shorter. But Japan's answer was something more than that. Obviously, it was a totally different, completely different track. And
it's got all sorts of, like you said, like the speed is. There's anxieties about the speed of sound as it breaks, and it comes out. You're going to create these sonic booms as it comes out of tunnels and things like this, isn't there?
Yeah, if you look at the current designs, and I absolutely love this. If you look at the current designs of the Shinkansen trains, they are they do well. The principle is biomimicry, so they mimic the qualities of animals and plant life. And this is, if you look at the nose of the trains, they mimic a woodpecker as a kingfisher. A kingfisher as it would go into water and kind of go down and get its prey. That's what this, and that was to prevent that sonic boom effect that you would have going so quickly through tunnels.
Yeah, because I just to sort of visit it, like as our current our 60s one has essentially like at the front of a Boeing or something, sort of coned now. Whereas now we're much like tapered, isn't it? As you say, like inspired by that sort of long beak and things.
No, absolutely. And this thing ends up becoming, a real symbol of Japanese prosperity and success. It's always worth remembering that the Japanese were one of the Axis powers that lost the Second World War, and this idea that we have of that country, of being a really progressive, future-facing, technical-driven, really successful country, comes kind of off the back of the 1960s and everything that comes with this. And I had the privilege to go to Wuppertal last year on the Schwebebahn, just to link that in.
Put that video if people
if anybody
haven't seen it yet. Go off and we'll a link that pops up or something. Definitely,
that'll pop up
wow.
But one thing that we were really taken away when we went there is this railway was a symbol of its community. It's only 13 kilometres long. It's been there since the early 1900s, and people there are really proud of it. The people who operate it are local, and it's a symbol of the success of that city. This is a symbol of the success of a country, and that's the thing. You can see again that people are so proud of it. The nation. I was very I was very lucky. I saved up a lot of money. Me and my partner went last year, and we travelled, all over the country on these bullet trains on all sorts of different transport modes actually. But the people that you speak to are so proud of this system, and it seems like rail is a real I don't know. It's like the lifeblood of their transport in a way that it used to be in Britain, and now it's roads, now it's cars.
Yeah. I mean, should we talk a little bit, because you've had the privilege of going on them now, and I know some visitors will be dreaming and sort of wanting to go on them. And tell a bit about what it's like, because the press stuff that comes out in the 60s is amazing. You know, there's this idea that like it's environmentally sealed. It's like it's a pressured environment, so it's got heating and air conditioning, which is quite
amazing for that time.
Amazing for that. And it's also got this thing that they do for publicity, where you can have a cup of water filled to the brim, and it won't spill on the journey, because it's right. This is apparently a publicity trick that they do. The Hideyoshima does is a cup of water filled to the brim, and it won't spill because the train is so stable.
Yep.
Apparently.
That's amazing.
But how did you find riding on it?
I absolutely loved it. Like from the whole experience. So the first time I went on it was, we were going from Tokyo to Hiroshima, and that's 4 hours, which is absolutely incredible, right? To go that.
Yeah, we're talking huge distances, aren't we? Like in this,
absolutely, yeah. And we got to the station, and we did like a lot of 30-somethings planning their dream holiday. We watched a lot of influencers on YouTube tell us how to do it. Got to do it. Yeah. So there's this, really smiley, lovely-looking couple going, "You've got to get to the station 3 hours before." And I thought, I know my railways really well. We'll get there an hour before and see what happens. We got to the station platform within 10 minutes, because it's a train station. So I don't know why we'd have got there really early. But that then gave me, and I loved this because my partner wasn't that bothered, but it gave me the time to watch everything that was going on. And I was watching these people immaculately dressed, with the white gloves, with the gorgeous suits, pointing and calling. And this is kind of a symbol of kind of efficiency and safety on Japanese rail operations, where you have everybody doing their jobs, pointing at the thing that they're checking, and then verbalizing it as well.
Okay.
So as the trains pull into the station, and there was one kind of every 10 minutes, you would see the guards lean out of the window, point at the floor, and then declare that the train was where it should be. Then they would point at the red light as on the side of the train, saying again that this is where it should be, pointing at the gates, and then they would open, and then they would allow the passengers off. And then you would look to your left, and there's the guy on the platform, and he's doing the same thing, but he's checking the CCTV, and again looking at everything and pointing at the first screen, the second screen, and verbalizing everything. Now that seems to it seemed to me at the time to be something. These are really ordered, aren't they?
Yeah.
And obviously I'd heard of it anyway, and because I'm this kind of personality, I thought, well, I'll really find out why it is that they do this. And it turns out that it's from the research from the 1980s from Japan's technical centre, similar to the BR Derbies, where they would reduce errors by 85%, doing monotonous jobs by doing this pointing and calling. So I thought that it was some kind of...
Okay.
I thought it was a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's an innovation. And I thought that was amazing. So anyway, so that was even before we got on, and and also as well, we went to the vending machine, got a hot coffee out of the vending machine. Love it.
I love your partner being in the background, because there are definitely lots of there is this genre, I think, and maybe there's a video to do on this, which is railway museum curator's partner suffering in silence. It's the curator gets obsessed with random thing at train station on holiday. There's definitely a lot of my holiday pictures that are like that.
It's so true. So she bless her got dragged around Kyoto Railway Museum. Loved it. Yamanashi Magalev sent her. I couldn't convince her to go, so I went on my own. So we then get on the train, and we knew that if you buy on the day or you buy weeks in advance, they're the same price.
Okay.
And what we wanted to do was buy them using the machines, just because then we didn't know exactly when we were going, and it obviously gives you that flexibility.
Yeah.
Because the price doesn't increase, we thought, let's do that. And there weren't any seats next to each other in the normal cars, so we thought, what an excuse then, we'll use the green cars. So we went first class.
Oh, okay. Okay, amazing.
Yeah, so for 4 hours it meant that I get to sit next to my partner. We sat on the Fuji side as well, and saw that as we went past. Oh, it's so good.
You got onto first class.
Yeah, got onto first class. Now first class isn't actually that different to normal.
You're killing the dream.
I know, I'm sorry, there's no kind of...
We'll get a very
service.
Polite but cross letter from Japan Railways as well, saying, actually, I think you're fine. There's a market difference. difference.
We did enjoy it. You know, it was 4 hours, and you got extra leg room, comfier seats. It's also the combination is 2 and 2. So again, you're not sat next to a stranger. It's just the two of you. Not to sound like an absolute recluse, but it was nice doing that. And as I say, we got to see Mount Fuji as we went past, which is absolutely that was a bucket list thing. That we wanted to do. What was great as well was the guard on the train. So they, I think it was a guy. Anyway, it was somebody on the train as they were walking past. I didn't know that they did this, and then I saw it firsthand for the first time, bowing as they leave each carriage.
Oh, interesting.
As if to kind of say thank you to the car, and then and then to move on. And again, just these symbols of a different belief system, culture, way of life, and so many positives from that as well. That you look at Britain and you think, oh, I'd love to take this back, and you can't because it's
well. Are we talking about Britain? Because you've talked about Derby.
Yeah.
And like one of the amazing objects in the collection is the Derby Visitor Book.
Yes.
So Derby, for people who are wondering why we're talking about Derby randomly, is British Rail's research centre set up in the 60s and carries on through to the sort of 80s and 90s. But in the Visitor Book is Hideo Shima.
Absolutely. Yeah, so he's now near the Duke of Edinburgh, near Prince Philip, looking around and seeing some of the amazing things that they were working on in Derby. Yeah. And I think that's something that we forget. We don't, obviously, as the curators of a railway museum, but people do forget just how much innovation was going on in post-war Britain on Britain's railways. It's seen as a kind of a downward slope, and it really wasn't like that. There were some amazing things, early maglev technology. The kind of hunting oscillation problem as well, with being led by an amazing engineer called Alan Wickens, who again I had the pleasure to meet at Locomotion in Shildon last year, which and be there on APT on the advanced passenger train that he designed, or he led on the project, sat with him. And what's funny is you look at Japan and their technical development in the 60s. They're working on a lot of these problems independently from Britain anyway. So the hunting oscillation as well, that was something that they were having to work out for the Shinkansen. Hideo Shima went to visit Derby, and doesn't that just show, I suppose, the power of what it was that they were looking into at that time, and the scale of innovation?
Yeah, I mean, because I think it's an important point, because people always look at Japan and say, well, why don't we have that? Why don't we have... when you take visitors around the bullet train here, one of the questions is, it must have been such a shock to people in Britain at the time. And it was a shock, but it wasn't necessarily an unexpected shock for British rail engineers, particularly at like that level of, like research level. Like they sort of knew that this was coming and were working on similar things themselves, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if we were able to start from scratch again? If Britain is the one that is starting out with the modern railway, and they build the tunnels too tight, or they do, they do all sorts of things that you would do differently. With the Shinkansen, a totally new line, you can do whatever you want. So I suppose to have something that's 4 for 8.5, but it's really wide and it's really comfortable, they could do that. Not to have level crossings, they could do that. To have again this advanced signalling system and try and. And do you know what? That's something that I didn't bring up actually, is this advanced signalling system and the level crossings. There have been no injuries and no fatalities in the 60 plus years.
This is just incredible.
How amazing is that?
Incredible record.
How amazing is that? There are 9, I think there's 9 Shinkansen lines across the country, and I think on the Tokaido Shinkansen alone, there's been 5.6 billion journeys since 1964. No fatalities, no injuries.
Yeah, and it's that incredible safety record you're talking of like pointing at things, checking things again, and taking this very, very seriously. All that, I think it must be like the British system is very, very safe as well.
Absolutely,
run in different but similar ways.
And safety is the number one priority of Britain's railways. Let's not get it wrong. Yeah. It really is a safe mode of transport. Yeah.
Do we want to stay with Britain a little bit, because I know we've got some other non-Shinkansen Japan things to talk about, because you've been sort of looking at like this endless question about, well, why don't we get this? But like there's a deeper, longer connection between Britain and Japan going back before Shinkansen, isn't there?
Yeah, there is absolutely. Yeah. So Japan's first railway opened in 1872, but the story starts way further back than that. So again, if you go to 1825 and Stockton and Danton, 1830 with Liverpool and Manchester, you're in a period where Japan is ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate. So this is a military government with a very intense feudal system where the samurai class are at the top and kind of farmers and labourers are at the bottom. And if you're in that feudal system, you can't move out of it.
And it's closed to outsiders as well in this period, famously, I think, isn't it?
That's the key. Is they've got this isolationist policy.
Yeah.
So they, if you leave the country, it's punishable by death. And they don't allow foreigners in. So they have trade with Chinese and the Dutch. But, for example, the Dutch, they're only allowed, I think it's Nagasaki port, but they're only allowed in this very small area and only within that.
Incredibly controlled foreign influence, to sort of limit foreign influence, I mean.
Absolutely, yeah. And, there's positives and negatives to that as well. It wasn't kind of the free society that I would want to live in, but at the same time, there were benefits to doing this. The problem is the world was changing massively, and the Japanese didn't know. So in the 265 years of rule by the Tokugawa shogunate, you had these massive empires, and obviously, building military might, colonization of a lot of places as well. And Japan didn't know that this was going on. In fact, they would find out tidbits from like these Dutch traders that would come, but obviously the Dutch traders had invested interest, so they didn't want to give them the full story. So, for example, the
drip feeding bits and pieces.
Feeding bits, yeah. So you've got the French Revolution, right?
Yeah.
Japan don't know that the whole kind of monarchy and democratic system, democratic system, the whole system, the political system of Western Europe is, up for grabs. They think it's something different because the Dutch are telling them something different. Okay. And so anyway, this all comes to a head in the mid 1800s. So it's the early 1850s when naval commander Matthew C. Perry, under instruction by the US president at the time, is trying to force trade with Japan through violence, basically. So turns up on the shores and has a load of battleships and says, we want to trade with you. You have a year to decide, and if not, we're going to come and kind of take over,
Which is a model that, like other nations, is not as unusual as it might seem. Like Britain's doing this with China, in the 1840s, like forcing ports open, forcing countries open to trade, whether they want it to be or not.
No, absolutely. With the 21st century mindset, this seems...
It does seem weird, but
but no, it's the reality of that period. And so Matthew C. Perry scares the crap basically out of them. They're really well.
As you would,
yeah. And the Tokugawa shogunate do something that they don't often do, which is discuss and they debate this. And they're not well known for that. They're basically, the people right at the very top tell everybody else what to do, and everyone follows. So they then debate this issue over the next 6 months. Matthew C. Perry comes early. He comes, I think, about 6 months later. And he says, well, what have you decided then? And they've discussed together that they will accept this. And that actually makes them seem really weak to the Japanese public, who aren't used to them sort of debating in this way. And it leads to the restoration of the emperor in 1868, Emperor Meiji, the Meiji Restoration. But before that, we've got this second visit by Matthew C. Perry. Now, he's brought with him, on hoping that the Japanese would accept, he's brought with him gifts. And one of these gifts is a steam locomotive.
Ah, okay.
And that's it. So
I didn't know. This is it. So this is the first steam locomotive to arrive in Japan.
I believe so. Okay. Yes. So I saw. I heard in a lecture it was the 1840s the first time that anyone in Japan had ever heard of a steam loco. I don't know when that may have been, but I know for a fact that this was, the first time that they saw it, and it's likely then that it must have been the first time it was ever on their land.
Yeah.
And this. And there were other things as well. I think there was a telegram system as well, and other innovations that kind of showed just how far Western civilization, I suppose, had progressed. That was the idea.
That sort of technology gap that had opened up in that period of isolation.
Exactly, and almost saying, look, you can have a slice of the pie if you want to, if you want to trade with us. So Japan saw that. But he didn't really have a massive impact until the Meiji Restoration in 1868. So again, thinking of the dates, that's the early 1850s, can then come to the late 1860s. And basically, the Tokugawa shogunate are very stuck in their ways. They like, Japan as it is. And there's this growing feeling that in Japan we should adopt a lot of Western ideas whilst retaining that kind of culture. And this is seen at the time as a very progressive idea. That is what Emperor Meiji basically enforces this idea of, right, we'll scrap the feudal system that we've got, and we'll build a military as well. They start to build their own empire. A modern military,
that would look familiar if you were coming from the US or France or one of the Western nations.
Absolutely, because before they were hamstrung, right? Because if you weren't samurai, then you weren't able to, so anybody could then join the military. Yeah. But what they needed to do, that was kind of external forces, right? But what they needed to do internally was nation build. And what's a great tool to build a nation?
Enter the railways.
Enter the railways, yeah. So you would connect the country up. And so they started planning this in the late 1860s. And as I say, the first railway in Japan opens in 1872, and it connects Tokyo with Yokohama, which is just kind of a little bit further south on the coast. It's not long it's not a long line, but obviously it's the start. It's the start of something. Yeah. And this is totally built and financed in Britain and by the British. And the reason for that is, like I say, they hadn't really heard of steam technology. They hadn't really heard of the railways. So they needed the experts, right? And in Britain, they had the experts. They also had experts in the US as well. But anyway, it turns out that it's Britain.
They send out people on like a grand tour, don't they? To like tour all of these nations and like they like report back on all the stuff they've got. I always think when you talk about this, like, they've been having contact with the Dutch. They must have been so annoyed with the Dutch. Suddenly, like, all these things that the Dutch have been holding out on.
But again, when we talk about, I think it's like tens or hundreds of people. It's very, very little as well. There's no kind of diplomacy. Well, I suppose there is diplomacy, but it's every man for himself, maybe. So they get the British finance this. I love that Japan's first locomotive is built. I think it's Newton Le Willows. You see there on Manchester,
which is like a connection because that's exactly where KF7 is built.
There you go.
Giant Chinese engine. So
amazing. And this line is kind of led by a guy called Edmund Morel. He's been working with the British building railways in like New Zealand and places like that. So basically other British colonies, and he knows 3 foot 6 inch. That's what he's building, and that's
like
what
a sort of narrow,
which is
like
narrow
mountain. Sometimes called like a mountain gauge, isn't it?
Exactly. It makes it versatile, right? You can build more for your money. And Japan is a very mountainous country, and that's why we've got such condensed kind of populations as well in cities. Even today, I think 80% of their land is mountainous, and people obviously inhabit the lowlands. So Edmund Morel suggests to the vice president of what's his title? He's in charge of finances for the country, basically.
Essentially, it's sort of like the finance minister, or
yes, I think that is the exact job title. So he convinces him that 3 foot 6 is the right answer. Really, he's like, you don't have all the money in the world. This can build you lots and lots of railways, and the thing is though, you have to pick one. Otherwise they won't connect. So you have to pick one. Yeah. Now this guy didn't know a lot about railways, right? He was just taking the advice he was given, and he later claims that this was the biggest mistake of his political life, making everything 3 foot 6. But that's what Japan's railways are. As I say, I travelled on some of these lines last year. They're great. It's not like you can. It's not like you're riding around, like the miniature railway that we've got outside. It doesn't feel like.
I think people when we talk about like smaller gauges, people in Britain think about like a toy train. Yeah, but it's not. It's just a slightly different sort of.
Exactly. So then if we move forward to the 1890s, the policy that Japan had really was, we'll get the foreign experts in, and then upskill our people, and then kick them out, and then we can do it ourselves. Okay. And the first domestically built loco is in the early 1890s. And who's leading on it from the British side? Richard Francis Trevithick. Yeah. The grandson.
The name that,
the grandson of the inventor of the steam loco. Yeah. How amazing is that?
No relation to Thomas, despite...
No.
Visually similar.
Well, you never know. I haven't seen his lineage.
But there is still a Trevithick family in Japan, I seem to recall, is there?
Right. If there is, I'm sure
telling me there's,
this must be the point then, but that cultural exchange didn't just go one way as well; it went the other. And we've got Watanabe is one of these. He's a student from Japan, an engineering student, comes over to the UK in the 1880s, I think, and he helps with the cantilever structure for the Forth Bridge.
Yeah, and people might be familiar with this because there's this really famous picture of him sitting on the model of the cantilevers to prove that that it can take the weight, and it's people amazing. See. Yeah. Thank you for that very huge history.
It's great, isn't it?
Into a really good talking points. Do we want to finish? Because whenever we talk about Japanese railways, we get all sorts of questions that aren't about Shinkansen as well. Do we want to talk about some of the other features that people find interesting or different about Japanese railways?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to start with the Hello Kitty train?
Yeah. So this is
Rob's favourite.
Yeah, I know very little about it. Just to say. But this is one of many joyful trains. They're called. So they have a lot of fun with their railways in a way that again we don't. And they are amazing. I got a Thomas the Tank Engine train from from Kawaguchiko.
Because Thomas is huge in Japan, isn't
absolutely
he?
Massive.
Almost like bigger than here. Actually,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And sorry, go.
No, that was it. And so you know what the front of the train ended up looking like, and then all the maquettes as well were all
amazing
Thomas stuff. Yeah. Right. So there's lots and lots of different rolling stock that they make sort of a bit different, and they give you as a passenger an experience like no other. So that Hello Kitty Shinkansen train is a commuter Shinkansen train.
Yeah.
There is, don't get me wrong, there's a soft play area in it, and there's a shop as well that sells Hello Kitty stuff. But actually, that kind of Hello Kitty stuff bleeds out the further you go. And if you go to the far end, it's just a normal carriage. So I expect all the businessmen, they're in their ties and that, they're all stood at that end.
If you're your stereotypical, I'm thinking like your stereotypical Japanese businessman who's worked like an 11-hour day on a Hello Kitty.
Yeah, exactly. Next to loads of kids who are running around getting all these plush toys.
We're thinking it sounds great. Maybe it doesn't sound great if you have to use it as your regular commute.
That's it. So there's so many more as well. Like there's a special Pikachu one as well. So that
amazing.
That operates where the terrible earthquake happened in 2011.
Of course.
And the idea was to bring more tourism. So what an amazing thing to do that. And again, Japan and railways, because they're so interlinked. And that, again, has a whole carriage. That's a bit of a playground. But this isn't just for kids. There's loads of other things. They've got bike services. So you can bring... you've just got loads of cyclists. And this service runs to the mountains. You stick your bike on, there's loads of storage for it. And then it comes back at the end of the day. And you've had a great day doing that. There's even a stargazing train. And it takes you to a certain point, again, where there's less pollution in the air, and you can see and you can get out. But they also do presentations on there that talk about physics and what an amazing thing to do to integrate into your transport network. I just cannot imagine that.
It's just making me think it's giving me vibes of the BR's failed attempt at the disco train.
Yes, yeah.
Which is probably a story for another time.
I love the disco train. Hey, we've paid for the stock footage now because we've got a football video coming out, so we might as well show it.
Yeah, we'll go to the football video if you want to learn about the BR's interesting experiment with the disco train and a very clear indication of why we don't have them anymore. The clue is not that disco has died as an art form.
No.
Do we want to? Because the other one that comes up, and the one that I think there's a lot of public debate about, and I know because I end up getting the pressing through every couple of years when it comes around, is this issue about ladies only carriages, which is a thing that British Railways did have for briefly in the 20s and 30s, but never really took off.
Yeah.
But in Japan has become a big part of the commuting landscape.
It has, and Japan historically had these in the early 1900s. And it kind of ended with the Second World War. And they brought this back in the year 2000. They first introduced it, and then it became quite popular because it worked, basically. It prevented groping, and all sorts of sexual violence against women and girls on rail services. But one of the big issues that I'd seen through my research was groping with basically drunk people.
Yeah.
But there's all sorts of things like staring and touching and rubbing and all sorts of horrible things. And it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. But there are other ways of trying to solve this awful problem. Like in the city of Vienna. So there's somebody I talk about a lot is she's called Eva Kale. And in the 1990s, she introduced the gender mainstreaming department to the city council. And what they did is they looked at a city that had been designed for men by men, Basically the people involved in the design of these things were always blokes, and then just subconsciously they were always designed for men. And she looked to reverse some of that, and did lots of work with the residents of Vienna, and looked to improve this through spatial design. If you go to a station in Vienna, you'll see lots of open spaces, you'll see lots of lights, you'll not see lots of narrow corridors and sort of
dark corners and blind spots, and absolutely
that kind of thing. Really subtle stuff that you maybe wouldn't notice otherwise, like the stickers that they've got that say this is an area for babies or people with pushchairs. It's a bloke holding the baby. It's sort of things like that why don't we do that anyway? And kind of, it seems like a really simple thing, but that I love as a case study. But yes, they have these women on the carriages, and we saw them when we were there last year, me and my partner. And the issue's awful, so whatever gets around it, I suppose.
And while it's safer for the women on those carriages, it does somehow up the risk for women in the mainstream carriages as well. The idea that sort of if they've made a conscious choice not to be in the women's carriage, so they must be more up for being approached, and
puts it on them. It puts that
real danger into the system. So it's I think, as you say, like with the Vienna example, there's lots of different solutions, aren't there? It's not one size fits all with this.
No, and something I talk a lot about with the Futures Gallery is what kind of future do you want to live in. So everything that we are going to display in this gallery has to solve a challenge to get to a future. I'm going to ask loads of questions. So with that, I would say that's your challenge. What kind of world do you want to live in the future? Do you want that segregation? Do you want a solution that doesn't do that, and so on and so forth? But at the end of the day, if you're solving the actual violence, then that's the main thing, right?
And I think that's one of the things that's going to be so exciting about the Futures Gallery is that all the way through the podcast series as well, we've been talking about there are these challenges that come up again and again, or new challenges that are emerging that engineers and cultural people, all sorts of different people in different walks of life are trying to solve together. And it's a really interesting, it's an interesting evolving thing. Nothing seems to be ever settled in the worlds of railways at all.
I know, that's what I love. I mean, we're going to actually have debate at the museum. How good's that? Yeah, there's no right or wrong answers.
Let's talk. I mean, we've got to bring it back to Shinkansen.
Yeah, let's go.
So let's talk about why it's in here in the museum. We love having it, but it's quite a complicated story for it arriving, because it's a weird thing for a British Railway Museum to decide to collect, isn't it? This Japanese technological marvel.
It is, absolutely. I started by saying there's no link with it wasn't built here and it didn't operate here, but it is seen as a really, really important vehicle. And it was decided then that we want a symbol of the kind of the train and the railway that changed the world in the 60s, halfway across the world. And so ours was built in 1976. It was in operation until the year 2000, and it came to York in 2001. So very, very quickly. And it was JR West, actually, so one of the Shinkansen lines on the very west of the country. And they basically restored it, and it got brought up the coast in Japan to Yokohama. And then it went by boat through going west and through going east even, and then through the Panama Canal, and then to Southampton, and then taken on the M1 where people would pass it on their cars.
There's some amazing footage of it coming, isn't there? There's an amazing there's an amazing shot of it being craned off the boat at Southampton with the then head curator Andrew Scargill watching, and the NRM press officer at the time looking quite nervous as this thing sort of dangles in midair.
They had to put it back on its bogies.
Yes,
so he's going, is this going to happen? And then the footage actually of it going up on the back of a lorry, basically on the M1. There's a bit of a sheet on the side of it that says, "This is the only time you will overtake a bullet train." As people are going, that's great. And then it gets here, obviously, and the footage is great as well to see. It's on YouTube if anybody wants to Google it. But trying to get it through the doors, because the thing is it's they had to get it on the railway, because if you know the geography of our site, we're right next to the East Coast Main Line, so they had to actually get it for that last mile on the East Coast Main Line. So it's the widest vehicle to ever travel on the East Coast Main Line, which I love. And then they had to bring it into the museum. And yes, we have standard gauge turntable, but it doesn't, recognise the fact that this vehicle is really, really wide. So It was inches, apparently, to get it in, but they did, and there was a great ceremony in 2001. An amazing story. I mean, you have to applaud the curators of 25 years ago to make that happen. That is a monumental effort, and I think about the things it takes to move our vehicles around now.
Oh no, massively, yeah.
Move them 100 yards. So to get it 6,000 miles, it's some going.
It's just it's such an iconic part of the museum now. It's really hard to imagine what that space looks like without the bullet train.
It is, yeah. It's one of the few vehicles that you can go in at the moment since COVID, and it's funny actually. They take a lot of Japanese engineers on they're on trips to Britain as part of a cultural exchange. In fact, that's something that we haven't talked about. If you'd like to talk about, we've got Adrian Shooter's archive in our collection.
So do you want to gloss who Adrian Shooter was really quickly?
Yeah, so Adrian Shooter is kind of a giant in realistic terms, because I think he was 6'9".
He's a huge guy.
But a giant of the privatised rail industry in Britain. He's a real success story. He makes the Chiltern Railways a huge success, and in fact, he died I think in 2022. But before that, he had started a company called Viva Rail, and the first battery-only passenger train in operation on the Great Western Railway very recently, in early 2026, came from that. So Adrian Shooter has a great legacy. And, and he's got I think he's got a statue, hasn't he, at Marylebone?
Yes.
But yeah, so one of the things that he set up was this exchange with the Japanese to kind of share skills between the British rail industry and the Japanese rail industry. And this was really off the back of Japan's railways going through privatisation in the late 80s, and Britain looking to do the same thing in the early to mid 90s, and learn from mistakes and learn from the successes. And that's how it started. But that still goes every year, and you still get a handful of people. I was fortunate enough last year to watch the delegates from last year give a presentation about what it is that they learn. Some amazing things in there as well. But in his archive, we see these documents that show some of those findings, and I went through it last year with one of the members of our team, and there's this great graph that's on there that I found, and it was where we are, and it was a flag of the Union Jack. It said low cost, low quality. Where we want to be, and it was a flag of the rising sun on high quality, high cost. So that was quite a cool thing. Yeah. I liked the idea that even these really clever engineers as well are kind of illustrating the simplicity of this. But so that's an amazing story in our collection as well. I can't remember where we were.
No, I mean, that seems like a good point for me to bring it to a close, unless there's anything else you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. What else could there be? I think I think that covers it. I mean, the main thing I wanted to do with this is have it actually as a conversation. I think we've done that, right?
I think so. Yeah. And like just another plug for like keep your eyes on the Futures Gallery.
Yeah.
We've talked about a thing that was incredibly futuristic in the 60s, but still the railways are an incredibly futuristic place to be working and problem solving, and that's going to be reflected in the gallery.
The railways have a future because there's no more efficient way at moving loads and loads of people and loads of goods. Yeah. And this gallery will explore the future of the railways without telling you what they are. It will ask you what they are. There are Japanese objects as well included in this. That's what we need to talk about. So the L0 series, maglev.
Yes, which is the next step forward for this.
Yes. Yeah. So we've got that, and we've got other case studies as well in the gallery. But should we talk about the L0 series?
Let's talk about what you're gonna have to explain to me. I'm gonna pretend I'm the curator who understands the technology.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have to explain to the viewers what maglev is very quickly.
So maglev is short for magnetic levitation, and it's a different way for trains basically to ride on route, right? So they don't have wheels that sit on rails. Instead, they levitate using magnets. That's the easiest way of explaining it. What the L0 series is it's the fastest train in the world for a start. So it went as fast as 602 kilometers an hour, which is absolutely amazing. And in operation, it'll go at 500 kilometers an hour, which is
like terrifying to consider that. So I always think when people talk about, we did the early railways with Anthony and stuff, and talked about people being terrified at going 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And you say, well, 500 miles an hour seems pretty terrifying to me.
It's amazing. To put this into context then, for every kilometre it's 7.2 seconds. And to get from Tokyo to Osaka, which bearing in mind it was 8 hours.
And we said was similar to London to Edinburgh.
London to Edinburgh, 1 hour 7, I think.
Wow.
I think it's around 1 hour 7, and to Nagoya 40 minutes. And the reason that they're trying to build this Chuo Shinkansen, as well, the line's shorter, they're not going along the coast, they are coming through. But the reason that they're doing this is to bring 70 million people into one community, commutable community. And I've talked about the future gallery being subjective, this idea that you ask people questions. I don't know what kind of future I really want to be in. Do I want a place 320 miles away, sort of like on my doorstep? Because it takes me 45 minutes to walk to the next village. That then means that Nagoya, for people in Tokyo, is like that in terms of travelling time. And what an amazing thing, but also, is it the right thing?
It's going to change our concepts of space and time and what is and isn't a place.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love it.
Railways have been doing since the start, I suppose. Yeah,
that's exactly what they do. They're time machines, aren't they?
Yeah.
They make time kind of shorter. And then the technology behind this is brilliant, is absolutely brilliant. So this is superconducting maglevs. And what that means really is you get your magnets and you take them to really sub-zero temperatures, and that then intensifies the magnetic force that they've got.
Amazing.
So these cars have magnets throughout them, and then you've got these coils on the guideway, and then they levitate and propel the train. But in order to get to that speed that they need to get to, so first they get to 150 kilometers an hour using wheels.
Yeah.
But these are rubber wheels, and they look a lot more like aeroplane kind of wheels.
Oh, interesting.
And I went when I went last year. We were at Fuji 5 Lakes and looking at Mount Fuji, and I said to Lauren, my partner, I said, the Yamanashi Maglev Test Centre is 40 minutes away. I can't have come out all the way across the world, have something that's going to be in the gallery. It's the world's fastest train. I can't not go. I need to go. She went, fine, go.
I can picture the face, because I think it's a very similar face to the face my wife has made to me when we've been like, oh, we're just going to it's just down the corner to this thing.
It's fair enough, like, right?
Yeah.
Because I planned on dragging her there, so she didn't fancy it.
She made the escape.
She made the escape, and it was a gorgeous autumn day as well.
Yeah.
And you went to this place and you saw an original test vehicle on the ground floor. On the second floor, there's loads of interactives showing you how this works, kids using it. There was even a miniature version of this that didn't use superconducting maglev technology, but it did use maglev technology. So I got to ride on that, queued up with all the kids. And then, the actual objects as well that are on there. So it showed you the windows, and it showed you the wheels, and that's how I know that the wheels were like this. And then an alarm goes off every sort of whatever it is, hour or so. And you think it's a fire alarm, and it's not. You run to the window at the side, and the real thing is going past.
Amazing.
So so there's the window, but then there's also the netting, which is kind of open to that, open to the to the area outside. The netting's only there for safety. But I stood there so that I can feel this thing going past at 500 kilometers an hour. It's bone rattling. It is really amazing. Yeah. I've never seen anything like it. I experienced something like that as well. And you're obviously quite a way away. But to have this alarm go off, and then for everybody in a museum to just descend to this one area, see something spectacular, and reinvigorate that want to learn more. So then you're going around the rest of the museum going, oh, that's how that works, and this is how this works, because I've seen the real thing. What an amazing museum experience that was. Yeah. But yeah, that is a story as well that's going in the Futures Gallery. And if we look into the future of Japan's railways, that is what they would point towards. But what I would say is Japan's culture is so intertwined with its railways because of the legacy of the Shinkansen, that it's only going to be a positive thing because the public is so sold on it anyway.
Yeah. That does seem like a good point. That's a nice side. This is one of the themes that's come up again and again, is this connection between people and railways. And we made a lot of jokes about being railway curators, but it's one of the real privileges is it's not a collection that we have to get people excited about. Is one of the real pleasures working is that visitors are already excited when they come in.
Definitely.
To have those conversations. So
definitely, and it's people at the centre of everything that the railways do. An army of people that build these things, operate these things, and
Lovely. Well, thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Thank you for that amazing tour of all things Japanese and railways.
Yeah, I've loved it.
Yeah, thank you. I've loved it too. I hope you've loved it as well. If you have, please consider leaving us a like. If you would like to see more of these, please subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments whether what you thought about this episode or whether you've got ideas of other things you'd like us to talk about, because we love having these chats. It's this or paperwork for us.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, so this is much more fun. But yeah, please, thank you for joining us.